I'm Blake Hunter. I'm with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Ambassador Real Estate, and today we have Michael Holton with the city of Treynor, Iowa. And thinking about Treynor and an upcoming development that I've been working on with the Vision Treynor Group, I've listened to you speak about Treynor multiple times, and if anybody has a question about Treynor, Michael has the answer. And you also, when you speak about Treynor, you are a cheerleader of the community. And so we thought, who better to have in the studio than you today to talk about that? And we just want to talk about, my goal from the start in working with Vision Treynor Group and beginning to promote this development it's really been about marketing the community, because you can buy a lot anywhere, you can build a house anywhere, but the point here is that you're choosing the community that you're going to live in. And so we've been very aware of that from the beginning, and we wanted to truly market the community and the people that live there. And so you're here to tell us about that.
Well, I appreciate all the accolades that are thrown upon me as being a cheerleader of Treynor. But, I'm going to start. We're going to go from the larger picture, and then we're going to work our way to the more defined picture. And the way I look at it is Southwest Iowa. Let's start with Southwest Iowa. What a great region to be in. Potawatomi County, as we sit there and look at the communities. I've always been, for the last 30, 35 years, working and professionally and both personally as a rural advocate. So I've always liked to see the best come out from the identity of the communities that you live in, because that is where your children, that's where you're going to live, that's where you're going to play, and basically it's going to define really who you are.
Yeah. And that's the thing about Treynor. One thing that I say a lot is that Treynor is, for lack of better terms, is what I call on the inner ring of outer communities of the Council Bluffs Omaha Metro. And what I say about that is I feel like you get the best of both worlds. You have that small town feel, but you are a straight shot and you're not very far from the amenities of the city. And so even if you live in Treynor, many people work, in the Omaha Council Bluffs area. And, for anyone that's familiar with the area, Highway 92, straight shot into Council Bluffs. And that's why I think promoting the community of Treynor is also easier, because we're not talking about something that's completely removed from a big metro area.
Well, and that's true. Although, like I said, one of the things about rural communities, and as you go further out from the metro area, you'll see the identities change a little bit because of that reason. Treynor is unique in that way because it's such a close and straight shot. One of the reasons that we moved from Nebraska to the Iowa and Treynor area, my wife and I looked at, okay, what is there? We talk about the amenities. Well, the amenity that my wife was drawn to right away was Hobby Lobby. Was 11 minutes, 12 minutes from her.
I was going to say Target, but Hobby Lobby works.
Target was really close. All of those are there and are something that you really can't overlook. And the downside of that for some small communities, and they'll always talk about it, is they don't have it right there in their rural community. So they're looking at like food deserts, and they look at grocery stores and things of that nature. Treynor has a little bit more of advantage because I don't ever see like a food desert really there when you're this close to the metro. But the way the makeup is of Treynor, it's still a rural community at heart. They live and breathe the country living, and it is still an agricultural-based rural community of Potawatomi County.
Yeah, and do you feel like the school really promotes that as well? That I feel like, a small community will really rally around their school and their athletics and those types of things, and I feel like Treynor does a really good job of that.
Yeah, and I think they have done that for years. I mean, Treynor schools are, by their own admission, they'll sit there and look at their rankings, and they do that because that's what schools do. They always have these testing, and they look at how they are amongst their peers in the state of Iowa. And Treynor is consistently in the top 10 across the state of Iowa, and in the type of smaller school that they are. they're number 2. And I've often asked, what's number 1? Well, that changes every so often, but Treynor's always up there in the top 5 in almost every category. Number 2 in the rural schools, top 10 when it comes to academics, and top 20 when it comes to overall scores and things like that. So hats off to the school for being such a draw for the Treynor community. And I think that's what I, as the cheerleader, as you said earlier, tried to rally around, because the community needed to, from when I came on board 6 years ago, was to catch up. And that's what I think we've been trying to do, is make it as appealing for the community to live in, as well as send your kids and your your children to the school, and we're doing that.
Yeah,
and that's what's happening.
That's great. Well, my next question was going to be: you've been with the city of Treynor now for 6 years, and I have a list here of a bunch of things that you noted that have changed with Treynor, and I think that's really important to point these out, because a lot of small communities are going the opposite direction. And so I'm just going to toss a couple of these things out. There's so many things here that have happened in a short amount of time, and they're all very positive. So first of all, your population's growing. That's not happening in most small communities.
No, agreed. And once again, we talked about the proximity and the closeness of the metro does help in that regard. Although we know in Pottawatomie County and even in Council Bluffs, there wasn't a lot of growth over the last 10 years, so less than 1%. So that's one of the big focuses that I think Council Bluffs has as well, is how do we attract people? We have Omaha. We have that ability to bring people into the region, and Treynor takes even a better look at that, and we've been able to grow by leaps and bounds. When I arrived, we were well under 1,000. I mean, we were hovering, and I always use a moving target. When you're a city administrator, you've got water bills. So I can tell you month to month what the population is on Treynor. So we were just under 1,000, and we were about 950 when I walked in the door. And I walked into the door really to do my job on March 2nd of 2020. And the irony of that is on March 8th, I shut down local government just like everyone else did because of COVID. So the start was different, because we were having to work behind closed doors, but we were able to see what was needing to be done. And I think one of the things, and we'll talk about this as we go along here, but you have to have a vision that isn't constrained to just 1 year. You have to really take a look at what the region, or in this case, Treynor, what we were going to look like in 5 years, what we were going to look like in 10 years, which we haven't reached. And in some cases, I've been looking at 20, 25 years out, even on the development of the infrastructure.
Yeah. I mean, and to that point, the development that, with Vision Treynor Group, the housing development, I mean, this has been a 15-year project. I mean, it's something that's didn't just come up in the last year or two. It's been something that has been planned. The execution of it was well done, and Travis Castle says all the time, if you're going to do it right. And so that's also something that I felt really good to get behind, because I felt like everything has been thought about, and the marketing of that is just that much easier for me because I can share that information.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because if all groups, when I came into Treynor as the city administrator, I looked at the Vision Treynor Group and Travis Castle, and they've been working at this for quite some time. And I have less patience than they do. And I think I have a lot of patience to weather out some of the storms that happen on the political horizons and everything else. But what I looked at is what they were doing. And in the interview process, when I was brought into the city of Treynor, on that interview panel was Mick Gutaw with the Treynor State Bank. And Mick is the one that emphasized that to Travis.
Yes.
Telling him that, hey, we can give money, we can do everything, but whatever you do it correctly so that it has a long-lasting effect. And I use the word more of anything else when it comes to Treynor or any place else, or dealing with Travis Castle and that legacy. The word legacy has to live on. And I think that's what it was that attracted me to the community was people like Travis Castle, the Vision Treynor Group, Mick Gutaw on the panel, and several others that have that same progressive, proactive approach and want to make Treynor the best place for people to come and live a good quality of life. And we talk about quality of life indexes every day. I live that no matter what, is to sit there. What does that mean?
Yeah.
How do you qualify it? How do you quantify it?
Mm-hmm. So back to our population growth, your household growth is up. We have obviously more plans to add more homes to the community. Your median age is going down, which is interesting for the state of Iowa in general and for a small community, I would say. You would know better than me on that. And your median household income is the 14th highest in Iowa. Could you expand on that a little bit?
I was blown away by that number. Now there's good and bad that come with that. Others will look at you and simply say, well, you've got all this median, the household income coming your way. You don't need any help or assistance and resources from the state or the county, and you can do it on your own. So there is a negative side to it, but the positive side is that it is fairly affluent. I'm not going to say everyone's, and we always have to deal with the entire population. But 14th, we're talking in the numbers that come in. Peosta, Iowa comes to mind. Van Meter is up in that range. And then you're looking at the communities, believe it or not, even the Waukees and the Bondurants and the ones that I've talked about and many times over and over again are actually lower on that median household income. So what that tells me is that we have people who live in Treynor. With that comes an expectation that they may want a little more. And so we're able to look at that and try to provide maybe what it is that they want. Travis Castle looks at that same way when they're looking at the recreational complex.
Yeah.
What is it they want? They want recreational opportunities. We just put in recently a 10-foot walking trail that connects the new subdivision that's in place to not only Highway 92, but to the school, which is south of Highway 92. So it was a great asset. We didn't have to do that. It's not required, but we wanted to put in a more or less a 10-foot sidewalk.
Yeah.
But it is a trail that they'll be able to use, and it's one of those amenities that is a quality of life index is walkability.
Yeah.
How is the walkability in your community?
Yep. And just to your point there, and back to where we're talking about is all the thought that gets put into that, back to quality of life and thinking about all those things. And I really appreciate the detail that you've obviously spent thinking about those things and talking to the community and just paying attention to that in general, because I think a lot of those relatively small things can get overlooked, when you're thinking about being a city administrator and all the things that you are dealing with on a daily basis. Something like quality of life is probably not always, obviously to you, you said it's top of mind, but to many city administrators, it's probably not. There's a lot of other things that have to be paid attention to just to keep the train on the tracks.
Well, it is, and like I said, I love hearing, and it is what I do, and I love hearing the praises. But I do have to give credit where credit's due. Not only we do have the people like Vision Treynor Group and Travis Castle, but we have a very proactive city council. A younger, the age you're talking about, the youngness. Most times, city councils are made up of probably more my age, 60 to 70-year-old, and in the retired age. Ours has probably got a median age on the council of 37, 38, which is exactly what Treynor is. And you did mention that earlier about the median age going down. It isn't a lot, but what's more significant about that is to change even 1 year of going down in the state of Iowa based upon what we know of the aging population throughout the entire state and region, is that 1 year is big.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's going up 2 to 3 years, and I see most of the time the median population in the majority of the communities around 48, 49, 50 years old because of that aging population. And in Treynor's case, we're at 37.
Yep. Very interesting. Do you see, from your 6 years in Trainer, do you see a lot of people that maybe have moved out of the community, but you see them work their way back, or they're looking to make their way back because they missed living in Trainer?
A lot, and I see more of the ones seeking the housing and not finding it, which is why it's so important for us to be able to get housing in residential, single-family residences in particular, into as quickly as we can, because they'll look, and when they can't find, then they're going to try to go elsewhere, not necessarily for the job. So they're looking for a lot of things, but once they've gotten that one factor that they can't live in the community because they can't find a home, we've lost them. So
Yeah.
we want to make sure that we can kind of get them to be able to return. We did see a little bit of the new subdivision that was built recently with 29 homes. A lot of those homes were the people that reside in those homes are from the community that simply moved out of their old home
Yep.
and moved into the new subdivision, opening up a house.
Yes.
And that was big.
Yep.
We didn't expect that, but that was big.
Yep. And I think that's, I think we're going to see more of that. And people are like, well, the question that comes to me is, well, not everyone's going to want to, they can't afford to build a new house and do all those things. And I'm like, but you got to think about the houses that it could open up, the existing ones that are currently in the community. And, you talk about our potential of 37 lots and potential of 37 homes. That's a big number in a small community. And then when you look at the Heartland subdivision, which is very new as well, 29 on top of that, that's a lot of progress over the course of 4 years.
Yeah, it has been a very short period of time, and the 29 homes, when it was started, and like a lot of the places that you'll see around that are doing subdivisions, if they use tax incremental financing, which a lot of them do, then you'll have a window to sort of develop and build around 15 years, give or take a little bit. And I think we're going to be in such an advantageous spot in Trainer because the Heartland, which is the 29 homes that you mentioned, that was up and going and really almost complete within 5.
Yeah.
And we're looking at these 2 new subdivisions, even if it's not 5, they are stretched out to go 15 years to develop. I very, just by just what I see, maybe 11 or 12 at the most. But, that's a quick turnaround. And then if you start looking at the household numbers, this is what I would attribute to a philosophy that many of them, not just myself, I don't come up with these things. There's a lot smarter people out there than I am, but it's smart growth. And the smart growth is developing in such a way that you're not putting in cookie-cutter houses in a subdivision that are, you hope, not substandard, but when things go up quickly, you have that possibility that if you don't follow everything in the details, we talked about that, the details are everything.
Yeah, you're so right. So, to the numbers, we've been talking numbers, but on the financial side, your city budget has grown significantly, and your city valuation, adding those homes has grown significantly as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. I think that's an interesting point is when you do tax incremental financing, there are those detractors out there, those people who feel like it's a drain on the tax base for a short period because it's without going into all of the complexities of TIF or tax incremental financing, it takes that tax base and freezes it so that you can use those dollars over a set period of time to develop the infrastructure that needs to go in. Once that's done, the 10 to 15 year period, then the money all returns back into the community in terms of what you can have for a significant tax base. But you're talking valuations. The valuations go in immediately. And so we've seen with the Heartland, when I first arrived in 2020, and looked at the past 2019 budgets that they had in place, the valuation was roughly 35 to 38 million. The Heartland brought this up, and we're now sitting at right around 58 million, and that's 20 million. The addition itself brought in about 12. So there was some additional houses that were built
Yeah.
because of the momentum. So there was some infill lots that we were able to be taken care of, and that was significant and great. And now we're looking at these 37.
Mm-hmm.
And based upon some of the numbers, I mean, I see it, even with today's numbers, looking to put in another 20 to 30 million. And that is where you start to see the real progress, because
Yeah.
that is just true dollars. That isn't anything that's skewed either by inflation or anything else.
Yep.
That's the valuation.
Yep. Yep. So another thing I noticed, through the city's Facebook page, is some of the local events that you guys are doing. One thing that I thought was really interesting is you had an event at Tweets for new residents. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that the community is doing on that stage, and specifically, welcoming new people?
The big changes that came about in Treynor over the last 5 years was once you start doing these physical things that we're talking about, we want to give the lots, and we want to make sure that they are right priced and everything, which is what we're talking about. You're going to be doing a great job, and I know we're going to have success. Give them a place to come to feel like they're welcome and that it's home. So we started about a year and a half ago working with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and Iowa State Extension on a process called Marketing Hometown America, MHA. It's a national-wide program, but we rebranded that in Treynor to be called Treynor's Tomorrow. And out of that came surveys, like we all get to see these surveys, and on what the community really wants. And it divided into 4 different groups, and of course housing being one of the largest committees and groups, which I get to head up just because of the position. I mean, it makes it easier for me internally. But there are a couple of other groups that were significant, and one of them was engagement. And that was a committee that felt like there were people who send their children into the school system and don't feel a part of Treynor, not only from the interior or from the city limits, but outside the city limits, where it's just as important that even the people in the countryside are part of the fabric of the community. So that was that event that you were talking about, is they looked to reach out to grab as many people who felt like they wanted to come in and be neighborly. And it was a success. I mean, there wasn't a lot of people there, but if you get 2 or 3 families, the one family in particular that came, which I thought was just wonderful, is the winery that was there in Treynor had shut down. And the house and some of the vines and some of the area out there has now been bought by a couple, and with young children. Knew nothing about the community, came to that event and basically reached out and were able to make connections that they otherwise wouldn't. He happens to be a pharmacist. 2 of the people that were on the engagement committee were pharmacists. One of them was actually works at Creighton University as a teaching pharmacy. So big connection. So that was one of the committees, and another committee that came out of that was beautification, and that was being spearheaded by a great group. And one of them is Mick's wife, Judy Gutaw. And there's another lady named Jody Volkins. I'll name drop here so that they can enjoy the notoriety.
There you go. They'll share the podcast now.
But I mean, they both they wanted to see something as simple as murals. Putting up banners. Making sure that the face or the way that Treynor looks to people just passing through was the best that it could be, and they continue to do that, and they're working on another mural project. And murals are nothing new, but doing murals that fit your community is unique and one of a kind, and identifies who you are. And the one we have in Treynor that they put up is by the post office, and it's got the agrarian Les Hills background with the stalks of corn. And what was unique about that was that it was, first of all, beautiful, but during the farmer's market season and the corn season, there was a couple of children who sold sweet corn and decided to sell it right there in front of that mural. And what picture that was to sit there and use and brand forever.
Yeah, that's very cool. Remind me who painted that. It was a younger gal, right? That was from Trainer.
Young graduate from the Treynor School, and I believe her last name was Kalstrup. I'd have to take a look at that to
Yes.
make sure
Yep.
I don't want to give a wrong name, but
Yep.
I'm pretty sure.
I believe you're right there. So I mean, besides all these, I mean, very important facts, you've done some other things recently. The Zion Road coming through. We were just talking before we started to record about how it's a road, but it's instrumental in the Treynor community, and you just talked about how much of a change that will be for people to be able to go that route from the new subdivisions and access, the recreational facilities that are there from what was there before. So can you talk about that process and the expense for the city to be able to do something like that?
Yeah, and this goes into that vision, that planning, and of course that particular road. And Blake, that when you do developments, a lot of time the developer is in charge of roads.
Yep.
That's just part of the walk of life of a developer. In this case, the development group that is putting to this two subdivisions is the Vision Treynor group. They really weren't equipped, nor were they going to be able to put that road in itself. They have infrastructure that will lead to the subdivisions.
Yep.
So how was the city or anyone else going to be able to connect the dots from A to B? And that's really what it was. We looked at Highway 92, and this was several years ago, and we looked at 300th Street, which leads out to Highway 6. So you have Highway 6 and Highway 92, both very much used a lot. Anyone that goes through Treynor also knows that the Four Corners
Yep.
is what the town is known for, but it's also very tight and very narrow and actually a little bit of a safety hazard. So the Four Corners is sitting right there. How do we take something that would maybe be like a relief pressure valve?
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. That was the Zion Road that now connects. It is built, and it will be opening up this spring. And it connects Highway 92 and goes through the new subdivision, the Heartland. Will connect both of the new subdivisions that are proposed and being built. So that'll be probably the biggest asset for that road. But it also goes by the recreational facilities that otherwise they were looking at leaving that to gravel, maybe for several years. So the city invested in $1.9 million to put that road in on their dime, saying that this was a necessary arterial. And I look at it, roads are roads. I mean, people look at Omaha, we've got Omaha and Council Bluffs, and they do roads all the time. But I look at this for Treynor as a transformational arterial, and traffic flow will never be the same once that road opens up.
I agree 100%. Michael, like I said, when I first started to talk to Vision Treynor Group about this opportunity, I was excited because it was different than any other development, and there's more of a story. There's more to market than just housing. You're really marketing the community, like I said when we got started, and I really appreciated the guys that I get to work with to do this. And so just in my, I'm a Council Bluffs born and raised, but Treynor's always been there, and just in the last year I've learned so much about the community and met a lot of people that are instrumental in the community. And like I said, I'm just really excited to get this thing off the ground, and we got a lot of work to do moving forward, but I'm excited to promote it, and I just appreciate you taking the time to come in here and talk about Treynor.
Well, and I'm glad you said something about Council Bluffs, because the one thing that I from my perspective, and I think a lot of people's perspective, is that everything that I do is relationship based.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many things that survival of a small town can't do without others.
Yeah.
And Council Bluffs is certainly one of those cases where we need Council Bluffs, we need the Chamber, we need Advanced Southwest Iowa, we need all these organizations that are out there helping towns like Treynor become a better version of themselves. And having you come on board, and I'm excited for that. I'm excited when I heard that the Blake Hunter was going to be the person that Vision Treynor Group was going to. That was a win. I thought that was a win-win, and there are several great people in the Council Bluffs area that we've worked with, but I'm glad to have and see you on board.
Thank you. Really appreciate that, Michael. If you got questions about the Treynor community, here's a great resource. Their Facebook page is really good. You put out a lot of information on there about what's going on, and even a lot of the statistics that we talked about today. Like I said, we'll be working on this development, and please reach out if you're interested.